So now we're going to move on to a very different case study. And so I'd like to invite Cliff Rostowski from BIDVEST AFCOM to come forward, and also then his supplier that he's been working very closely with, Bruce and Tabisi. But first of all, to Cliff. Yeah, so your case is very different. So rather than looking at spreading the benefits through many hundreds of small suppliers, you had a very deliberate strategy to work with one key supplier. And I'm interested to know what it was. What was a problem that you kind of identified right at the beginning when you thought about this process? What was it? What was a problem that you actually identified that you wanted to try to resolve?
Okay, hi Catherine, and hi everybody participating in this case study. First of all, just to put it into context, I'll give you a bit of an overview about BIDVEST AFCOM. We are a company that is involved, and we are the leader, we believe, in the manufacture, distribution, and provisioning of innovative packaging and fastening solutions to the commerce, service, mining, and agricultural sectors. We've been in business for 93 years, established in 1928, and to date we are actually the longest standing member of the BIDVEST Group. We employ 314 staff members across 9 sales branches and 3 factories. I think being part of such a significant and diverse group, the challenge that we had was that traditionally business would look to possibly achieve their supplier development objectives using or procuring services and products from typically businesses such as stationary businesses, businesses offering cleaning services, hygiene, security, printing, office furniture, etc., etc. Now, the challenge within BIDVEST is that BIDVEST actually owns businesses that participate in every single one of these sectors. So clearly, for us, it was important to try and find or develop a supplier that could supply us, which wouldn't compete with our own sister companies. So our objective was really to try and find a significant supplier that really did not compete with us.
Great, thank you. And so you really came up with such a big, bold strategy. And what, if you could just tell me what exactly was that strategy? I'm just going to move to the forward. You came up with a model that you're particularly keen on seeing replicated. Do you want to explain a little bit about this model that you've developed? Okay,
I think to start off with, first of all, what was critical to us was that we wanted to try and achieve an authentic BE compliance partner, if you like. And what was very important was that we weren't really interested in box ticking or fronting or anything of that nature, which is obviously a problem that we do see, which is fairly prevalent. We wanted to create something which was significant and that we believed was real transformation. So what we did was we looked, first of all, we looked for spend that was not spend which could be deemed to be an operational expenditure. We looked at something which could be significant in our lives, and that obviously would be something which was part of our cost of sales. We identified being a sort of a very broad based supplier of a significantly varied product. We looked at the various groupings of product that we supply, and we identified the film product. And what I mean by that is the stretch and shrink industry, not the movies, as a fairly untransformed industry in our country. And we then came up with a model. And I think what was critical is that in order for this model to be effective, you need to have really all the participants. So really from our perspective, we identified that there was a particular supplier, an untransformed business that could participate in the structure and could effectively transfer in the manufacturing capability and expertise.
We lost Cliff. Okay, we seem to have had a break from Cliff, so I'm actually going to then move on to comment from Bruce. So Bruce, you were the accelerator they called. So you were the small suppliers, no longer a small supplier, I have to say, but you were the person that they identified. And I'm really interested to know from you, what did that mean to you? Give us a little bit of context. Who were you back in the day when this whole journey began?
Morning, Catherine, and morning to all the participants in this case study. Okay, my name is Bruce Ntlego. I went to UKZN, studied a BCom accounting, majored in finance, marketing, management, and economics. I started my career at Procter & Gamble. I think one of my greatest highlights in my career at Procter & Gamble was the fact that I was very integral in creating a bottom line distribution model for them on how to actually access the township market more effectively. And in so doing, I got rewarded and recognized by being awarded a very prestigious award that gets given to about 2.5% of employees on a global scale, which was obviously a P&G 100 machine shares. In 2008, I had an opportunity which was provided to me by Procter & Gamble to actually start up my own bottom-end distribution company, which was effectively a cash van operation, distributing their products into townships. And that business was called Pavati Trading. It was a services business, and we were doing and distribution for them. From 2008 up until 2011, we took that company from a zero turnover, myself and my partners, to over 100 million rand in turnover, employing about 80 people on a full-time basis and operating in 3 different sites. And then came 2014. We obviously, unfortunately, that contract was moved to a multinational company, and it was no longer. They invited us to participate with them. The company is still around today, called Diplomat, but it just didn't make sense for us and for our entrepreneurial journey where we are. And we had to look and take stock of obviously the lessons we had learned for those 6 years operating that business. And one of the key things that we really picked up was, especially in this kind of economy, is that you need to own your means to production. So the problem that we wanted to answer in our journey, our entrepreneurial journey, was moving towards manufacturing. And within that year, between 2014 to 2015, we then got introduced to the BIDVEST group, and in particular to BIDVEST AFCOM, who then identified us as an ideal candidate for the model that between themselves, their service provider called African Air IQ, ourselves, and obviously our technical partner, whom BIDVEST assisted us to identify. We started on this journey of transforming from being a service provider company into a manufacturing entity, and then hence Pavati Plastics or Pavati PSA was then born. That process, started from 2015. Cliff, I think, was still trying to explain the model before you broke off. I think he's back online. So before I get into explaining our journey, maybe it would be ideal to get context from his perspective of co-players.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I think that'd be great. Let's just go back then to Cliff, and let's get that model up there again. Maybe you can just finish off explaining on the model. Then, Cliff. Thank you. Nope. Looks like Cliff's gone again.
Okay. No,
you there?
I'm here, I think. I'm back.
Yes, you're back.
Okay, I'll speak quickly. So as I discussed, the Capacity Accelerator was really the company that was going to provide the manufacturing capability and expertise. We needed a new co, and that's obviously the beneficiary of the structure. And in this case, it's Pavati Plastics, which was a startup entity that would be 51% Black owned. and they would obviously be the recipient of the manufacturing capability and expertise. Bruce, in this instance, was the shareholder and the CEO of Pavati. BIDVEST AFCOM would sign an initial 3-year offtake agreement or procurement contract with Pavati. And what's very significant is that this contract would be based upon normal commercial criteria of price, product, and service. So at no stage would we be prejudicing ourselves, in inverted commas, by supporting this new entity. It would have to be on a normal commercial basis. And on the strength of our 3-year agreement and relationship that we developed with this newco, ABSA, in this instance, would provide the funding. They would be the funder, and they would provide an initial credit line to fund the contribution of capital equipment by Bruce to Pavati. So effectively, the model is that the capacity accelerator, PSA Plastics, transfers in certain equipment into newco, and that would be matched by an equal contribution from, in this instance, Bruce, who would provide an equal contribution of capital equipment based upon the funding of ABSA. And that's essentially the model. I think the success of the model has been that within a very short period of time, within in fact 3 years, this particular entity, Pavati, has become our single largest supplier, and has proved itself to be a credible supplier, and is a fully fledged business now.
Thank you, Cliff. I think for me, what's really important for people to understand is that this wasn't just a case of taking an existing white-owned business and making it BEE compliant. What you really did here was you identified a gap in the market for a new business to grow. And I think the key here is that currently only 30% of Pavati Plastics revenue actually comes from BIDVEST AFCOM. And so the business has grown far beyond what it was in the first place to be a business and a success in its own right. And I think that that's really key to understand in this model. Thank you. Thanks for that, Cliff. So let's just then go back to Bruce. And Bruce, yeah, you were just starting. You had explained to us that you'd already had a long journey. You were well established, somebody with a reputation. I love the fact that you came out of corporate. I think people often miss that successful businesses are started by entrepreneurs that have good, solid insiders information as to how a big company works. And so I think you've explained that really nicely. I think let's just move on to what did it mean. There is a timeline that was showing there that it wasn't an overnight success. It has been quite a long journey, but maybe just quickly run us through that timeline very briefly, and then maybe let's get to where you are now. So what has this growth meant? What transformation has happened for you as a company, and maybe for you as an individual as well?
Okay, yeah, back to the timeline. I think just adding on to what Cliff was saying, obviously our technical partner, Capacity Accelerator, in this particular case, had different technology to what the AFCOM offtake required us to deliver on. So of the 80% of the offtake, about 20% of that we could actually manufacture with the existing assets that our Capacity Accelerator had, and hence why the need then for ABSA to actually come on board to assist us to fund new capital equipment that will enable us to take advantage of the opportunity provided to us by BIDVEST in this particular case. ABSA came on board. It took us a good 18 months to move from obviously conceptual stage to a final funding stage with them, because as an institution as well, this was I think a very innovative model, and everybody still needed to navigate around it to try and understand how to use the current existing credit criteria, which were normal business banking requirements, versus looking at this in an innovative way. Because I mean, the initial funding that we requested from ABSA was actually 50 million, but the appetite as a proof of concept ended up at about 30 million to assist us into acquiring obviously the new assets. What assisted us obviously by having an existing infrastructure to plug into was that, especially one of the biggest challenges that I think we as entrepreneurs don't realize, is that as much as you might have the equipment, the equipment is a car. Without fuel, the car can't move. So credit lines were the biggest challenge. I mean, the likes of Sasol, 1, 3, 4, 5-year credit trading history in order to be able to give a new entrance into the market, sufficient credit lines to fill up a very, very hungry machine. I mean, a 30 million rand machine requires at least 30 million rand of working capital just to get it running. So that's where also the assistance of the existing PSA business also helped us with, and that we can tap into their existing relationships with raw material suppliers. And by September 2017, our new equipment had arrived, and we could then, by end of that year, take advantage of supplying to AFCOM beginning of 2018. In that year, we also then moved with ABSA. We had actually, because that been part of the journey, had moved from being just an enterprise development initiative to ABSA's perspective into being a supplier to them, because within their own supply chain, they identified that they actually consume products that are made from the raw material that makes plastic, and your bank bags, your cash management bags that they move money with. And truth and behold, we didn't have the capacity to do it, neither ourselves nor our technical partner had the equipment. And then ABSA threw in additional money to assist us to acquire those assets now to also get into that new market. So we went from being a new entrance into the market, because our objective, as I said, what we were trying to answer for our own entrepreneurial journey was moving away from a services related business, which is Pavati trading, because I mean, overnight a contract can be moved from one distribution center to the next one. But being a critical partner in a business like we were with AFCOM, it's as you build your capabilities and as you build your innovation and you start being a good supplier, it's very hard for them to swap suppliers unless we can't supply. By 2018, we had employed as part of our strategy mostly youth into the new company. The old company used to employ about 90 people, and as things stand today, we are close to 200 people as the two joint companies. All new investment is obviously coming from the Pavati side, because our partner, and I think that's where AFCOM also got it right, is that the partner that they linked us up to was at the sunset of his entrepreneurial journey, while we are still at a very active stage. So there's a gradual exit strategy for them as well, as we are taking advantage more and more into the sector. When we came in, it was myself and my wife, who's my partner. Our objective was to really be a specialist in the packaging environment, not just come in on secondary packaging. Yes, secondary packaging was our foot into market, but we really wanted to expand into specialized product, import replacement products, etc. And already in 2018, we had started conversations with the Department of Trade and Industry, as well as with IDC and ABSA, on looking at how can we create a local, black-owned, black-managed manufacturing entity that can take advantage of the imports that are coming in. That new project took us a good 20 months to actually get to an approval stage, and by December 2020, IDC, ABSA, and DTI actually approved a capital expenditure of close to 150 million rand, which is what we're currently busy with now, expanding our factory into specialized products that I think Lita and his colleagues, and you will see also part of that we're tactically targeted to bring onto our books, was to answer the one thing, which is, as much as locally we've got a lot of print houses, we've got very few specialized film converters locally on your polyprop substrates, etc., that are utilized in a lot of food packaging, and that's the place where our investment is actually taking us into. We've just taken.
Lovely, that's lovely. Thank you, Bruce. I'm going to just let's just quickly show a couple of images of where you are now, because I think that the scale of your operations is really significant. You know, this is really a business that started small and has massively grown, not only to supply to Pavati AFCOM, but to really to supply well beyond that. And I think this is really a success story at scale. I think it is really a model. I'm really delighted to be able to showcase to everybody as something that we can look to replicate. So thank you so much, Bruce, for that insight. I think it's important to understand that it's not an overnight success, that this has been a long, hard journey, and it's been able to be possible with the close partnership and support of BIDVEST AFCOM, and then of course with the funding assistance of ABSA. So thank you so much for that insight. Very, very interesting case study. I want to go now to Tiamo Mokolani. Again, obviously I'm going to give the floor to you as a representative of ABSA. ABSA played a very key role in the growth of this, in the massive growth of this entity. And I just wondered if you had any particular very tight response about the possible conflicts or anything like that, anything that flags here for you in procurement.
You know, this story, it's very, very impressive because it moves from zero to hero, you know, in terms of growth, in terms of the model, which is scalable and can be replicated in many facets. However, I just want to caution something against the fast growth. You know, in terms of this fast growth, sometimes we diversify too quickly that we end up having multiple products, and then we are not able to deliver, because the true growth lies within that specialist core element that Bruce was talking about, which is their core business, which made the growth to be so significant. And going on further, I would like to say that the same model that is replicated from the BIDVEST group, it is now in the hands of Pavati as a group, and sharing is caring. Some of those non-core, if I may call it them that, can actually be used to introduce a model in order to support the other small businesses going forward. And kudos to you, well done. Simply put, do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiamo. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. I second those thoughts. I'd like to move now to Lita. I think, Lita, this becomes interesting for you, maybe with your aggregators model, this kind of rapid scale up. It's a little different, or maybe it's the same. What does this mean for you? What can you take out of this that might be valuable in your own supply chain?
Thanks. Firstly, I must also commend Cliff for the work well done, and also from Bruce for actually taking the challenge and really be able not only to take the opportunity, but to actually execute it, because that's the biggest challenge in our spaces. We create these opportunities. So for me, if I would talk one or two things about the elements that Cliff spoke about, which are very much entrenched in the model that we use. One of the challenges in Africa generally, and specifically South Africa, is that we are caught between two worlds, right? We are caught between what is called economic participation and economic transformation. And sometimes we think the two are interchangeable. They are not. Because when you talk about economic participation, it's getting as many people in. That's where you pretty much have a lot of people participating, but you might find that in certain industries, they don't. I could have in agriculture 1,000 farmers, but they won't even supplying 1% of what we want, right? Purely because they are too small scale. And on the economic transformation, once you've made that choice that you want to transform, because I suppose from the BIDVEST side, that was the decision, that we want to make a meaningful shift. What then they did, which again is something I subscribed, they looked into their cost of sales, which that is tied into your core business, right? And said, what am I buying, and what am I buying at scale? And that is important into this business, because that already means issues of sustainability are guaranteed. Anything you buy from your cost of sale is something that is very meaningful to the organization. And then the normal commercial arrangement. Because part of the challenge with ESD, I mean, the work that we do, is that we handle people with such soft gloves, such that they don't end up growing and be able to raise the 100 million that Bruce was talking about. because for almost every problem they have, they run back. They are not resilient because we are always there to catch them, you know, to guide them, and operating on normal commercial terms, which we do at Tiger. Some of our suppliers, if they don't supply us our volumes, they are shorting us, right? And they get sued, right? And I said they mustn't remove it, because that must be an anxiety of an entrepreneur if they want to make it. And making sure that we support them, that they don't have a force majeure issue in breaking that contract. That's our job. We shouldn't change the terms of the game, because when they grow and they get to a certain stage and you start now wanting to normalize it, most of them will collapse, because at the beginning they were not set up and started through normal trading and commercial terms, right? He's also mentioned a long haul, 3 years, 5 years commitment, because Bruce was never going to make it if you've got a 1 year view. You always have to have a longer view, because he is going to make mistakes along the way, but you want to make sure he's got a runway to grow. But he has to catch up very quickly. Collaboration became key, because, you know, which again from Tiger, we are not a financing organization. No one will grow big in our supply chain unless we've got financiers coming in. We have no choice in that, which I think then, you know, Cliff has done that to bring, you know, upside to the deal to make sure that there is funding. That's one part which Cliff did, yeah. But there's the other part from Bruce in terms of he had the expertise, the competence, right? And sometimes entrepreneurs come to us and want them to build the expertise. And unfortunately, you can't scale people which still need to learn the basics of business, right? So when you're talking scaling, you gotta bring people that have already got the wealth of information, the knowledge and the expertise, and also then you can invest in their infrastructure, well knowing that they've got the competency. And part of what you said, I think, Catherine, drawing also from corporate is also going to work. Some of the people that have worked, that they've experienced working environment, they are cheaper to invest on the skill side because they've already, you know, acquired that skill, right? But that model works when you talk about scaling and, you know, building these models. But when you talk economic participation, where you want to try to get as many people, that's where your incubators come in. That is where you train as many people. You start them with non-core, hoping that they'll be able to grow. So for me, I can resonate with the model. It's got all the right elements. My last point on this is that as Africa, we are never going to grow if we do not share these models. You know, as lovely. From Tiger, as doing what I'm doing, I need to make sure I can work with my colleagues at Pioneer, at RCL. You know, I presented, for example, to McCain's Exco. I'm presenting to, you know, the SPEC group. We need to share this information. There is no competition in development because we're all in the same boat. We need our society uplifted. And if I figured out something and Cliff has figured out something, we need to tell others so that they can actually replicate. It minimizes mistakes, but it also propels, you know, in terms of building small businesses that are scalable far more quicker.
Lovely, thank you, Lita. I think you raised some really, really important points. Are we too soft on supply development? I think what's really key, a key element of the success of the Pavati Plastics is that they operated on purely commercial basis. And what I like about that is an inbuilt assumption that they were able to do it. And so that is definitely one of the really key elements of scaling a significantly successful business, and one that is central, one of those central suppliers, not the kind of sidearm story of the softer touch. But I do think in supply development you kind of need both, right? Because I know in your space in agriculture, if you were totally tough and you said, "Listen, guys, shape up or ship out," you know, you're gonna cut out a lot of your small suppliers. So I do think that these both elements, the softer touch for the small guys and the real tough commercial stance for the big players there's a place for both. I think let's now go to some questions from our delegates. I do see one there from Charles. He was asking this question of Cliff. Who actually drove the process of getting your deal conceptualized? Who actually drove this model? Was it procurement? Was it you know, Exco? Who actually was central to designing and driving the model?
Okay, thank you. So we did use an external consulting company who assisted us through this process. But from an internal BIDVEST AFCOM perspective, you know, we have a very, very flat structure. So really, I was the key driver. being the MD, etc. And that's really how we operate. So we don't have departments of people. It was really driven by myself and my core team. Once we had conceptualized the idea, it was just a function of getting the parties in place.
Great, excellent. Thanks for that, Cliff. So keep questions coming from the delegates if there are. Please just pop them in your chat and they'll come through to us. I want to ask. I really want to put a question to Henry. This model that BIDVEST has shared is very different to the model that you've got, Henry. Are there elements from this that you think can translate into your environment?
Absolutely, Catherine, and particularly looking into our supply chain within the construction industry. The construction industry is synonymous with sort of struggles to actively transform some of the big suppliers, with a number of our big contracts going to the usual suppliers. So I definitely think there's room for this model. And it's a really sort of efficient, I think an efficient model to scale impact within one supplier. I think that the one challenge that we do however face is that both our supply chain and precinct is so diverse, and to manage resource and capacity of a wide variety of sectors. Often you need to sort of manage what is within your locus of control. But the model is there, and I'm really thankful for the ability to learn from Cliff and Bruce today.
Great, excellent. I'm going to come to Lola just now, but before I go there, I'd like to ask Ashra. Do you believe that you, as a small supplier, kind of getting a soft touch, or do you feel that you're having to negotiate on purely commercial terms?
I would say both. Just listening to the candidates here, I've learned so much, especially with the area where the waterfront management supported me in terms of being compliant. It just opened more doors and opportunities for me. So yes, thank you to everybody that's here this morning. I've learned so much. Being compliant, before I always felt that, is it necessary to do that? I was always scared to approach SARS, to be honest. But being compliant and the guidelines that the waterfront management gave me, it just opened more doors and opportunities for me.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much for that input. Yeah, Lola, this model on a global scale, what's your feeling about it? Being able to use this and replicate it and hone it and improve it in order to scale, inclusive growth in Africa.
I've just been enjoying having a front row seat at this excellent example of collaboration to solve real world problems for small businesses. That's essentially what this is. We come together and we say we should be doing this. We should collaborate to solve these problems. But what that really looks like when folks like BIDVEST and ABSA and Pavati and the teams that have been working on this kind of model come together to develop a system a model like this and implement it, often you don't even anticipate the unintended consequences. And I'm sure they've had to reiterate and make changes as they went along. They must have had a tough time trying to figure out how to select the right small business to invest in. They're looking at competence. They're looking at what is the long-term sustainability of this particular business. How do we make sure we're not excluding other businesses that might be equally, able to meet the objectives of the program. And when you think about it, in South Africa and many other African countries, access to finance is a major challenge for small businesses. But in this model, they didn't only get access to finance. Like Bruce mentioned, they've been talking with banks to access finance or credit lines to scale the business. But that has been a challenge. And I was just looking it up. South Africa ranks about the 4th or 5th country where bank charges are the highest. So this is a critical issue for small businesses. But here's a model that doesn't only give access to finance. It gives access to infrastructure that they even need, and Bruce was talking about that earlier. It gives access to other folks in the industry that can help them build their capacity and develop their skills quickly. And again, it also gave them access to business opportunities, the 2 to 3 year purchase orders that would definitely be coming from BIDVEST. And other organizations would ensure sustainability. And I was really happy to hear that the terms that they engaged with the new co on are the commercial terms. I can't stress that enough when Letha was talking about that. But indeed, again, you experienced the challenge you talked about, Catherine, where you want to make sure that you're not treating small businesses with kids' gloves, but you at the same time you're giving them enough support to survive. Yep. And that's the balance to strike that I think this kind of model really helps those of us in the development space learn from, so we know what to expect when we're investing in a project like this. We know that there will be these kinds of challenges, and the experts on the ground would know how to manage and navigate these challenges so that the solutions and the outcomes are sustainable and replicable in other settings. So really excited to listen to.
Thank you, Lola. Thank you for those comments. I think one of you've touched on a couple of things is selection, and I know we don't have time, unfortunately, to go through it in detail, but I do know that Cliff and his team sat for a long time making sure that they had identified the right person. The same thing with Bruce, making sure that it's a match. That isn't something that happens overnight, and you're certainly not going to invest in a long-term journey in partnership with somebody that you don't, unless you know, like, and trust them. I think the other element of this model, and probably the VNA one as well, is that it's a true partnership. It's when BIDVEST AFCOM came alongside Pavati Plastics that they were able together to raise the finance that was necessary for their growth. And I think that that's really key, is that access to finance isn't just somebody putting their hands out. It's really about having a network of people that can support and motivate for that, because that's the way that obviously investors are sure that they've reduced risk. So maybe I just had one question from Vusi. He's just asking Cliff, how did BIDVEST overcome the barrier or reluctance of your current operations and procurement managers in encouraging them to move forward from the old way that they did business to dealing with this new supplier? Did you have a challenge there, and if so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I think first of all, what is important in a model like this is that as a responsible company, we need to have multiple suppliers. So we never for once excluded all our suppliers, and in fact today we have competitors to Bruce. We don't buy exclusively from Pavati, but they do get the lion's share. But I think what is important is that we have to keep them honest, in inverted commas. We have to keep them on their toes, and we have to make sure that the commercial principles are in place. So it wasn't, a switch off of everybody else and a switch on of Pavati. It was a phase in over a period of time as the relationship evolved and developed, so we could obviously shift more business their way. So that was the first thing. Secondly, again, I think it's a function of structure. And I think, as I mentioned before, BIDVEST AFCOM is a very flat structure. We don't have layers of procurement departments, etc. It's literally a function of me talking to the guy who sits opposite me and discussing that we're going to support this particular supplier because there's a good reason to do so. So really, in our environment, it was fairly easy to manage. But I think what is critical is that you must be responsible in terms of how you procure, and you must have multiple suppliers, etc., and ensure that the basic principles are in place.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cliff. Well, that's all we have time for, folks. So I'm going to have to close it there. I want to thank the presenters and the panelists for their really insightful input. Fantastic case studies. I'm so delighted to have been able to share those, and really encourage you, all of you on the call, to engage with each other, continue with these questions. And I want to maybe leave you with one note on both of these case studies. They're driven by EXCO. The support comes from the top, from the very top. And it's really key. It's something that has been shown all through the supplier development processes, is the businesses where supplier development is made a key strategic advantage at executive level are the ones that are really able to deliver value, not only for the small suppliers, but also for the companies themselves. So with then as a last comment, I'd like to remind you all to listen in to the awarding of the 2021 ABSA Business Day Supply Development Awards that will be hosted on the 18th of November. Go to the website sdawards.co.za to find out more. And lastly, again, thank you so much to ABSA. You play such an incredibly significant role in this sector, and I'm really delighted and very grateful for the support that you give to these awards. They're iconic, and they're iconic because you're part of it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and we'll meet again at the next Insiders Track. Goodbye.